On a normal day, a lumberjack and their co-workers are usually assigned enough trees to occupy them and meet their quota. The lumberjack had let the chainsaws roar all day in order to meet the builder's building requirements. Like every day, the lumberjack and his team got down to the task of the day with total commitment. But as the chainsaws warmed up, the team realized they had to stop. They saw something that stopped their ongoing operations. This thing they saw was not very well known in the area. It was an unusual discovery for the entire work team. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Everything was going well for the loggers at Georgia Craft Co. until the teeth of the first chainsaw began to grind against a particular tree. It was going to bring the whole team the most unimaginable experience of their lives. The world's population does not approve of deforestation, hence their discontent. So many people are against cutting down trees that are sometimes the most beautiful. On the other hand, in some regions, families have based their industries on wood. Few people are enthusiastic about the lumberjack trade. They are mostly frowned upon because of the nature of their work, that is, because they cut down all the beautiful trees in the woods. But in Jasper City, where every family has a direct or indirect connection to the lumber industry, they are somewhat tolerated. A large majority of American chestnut trees are located in the mountains near the town of Jasper and are a significant source of income due to their commercial value. Chestnuts usually come out of the ground and begin to rise in much less time than oaks. One fine morning in 1980, about 7 to 8 Georgia Craft Co. workers left their homes to work just after 10 a.m. They were all in an empty truck heading to the site for the day. It was a normal day, at least until noon. As soon as they got back to work after lunch, they noticed something strange about one of the trees. Upon returning from the break, a strange thing was noticed on the trees to be felled. This is something unusual, a new discovery made by workers since they started working in this profession. They were on schedule and had cut down most of the chestnut trees they should have cut. Few of them remained, including a particularly light tree that appeared to be hollow inside. At first glance, it looked like it would require the simplest of effort compared to the rest of the trees. However, the tree contained a terrible secret in itself, and which they were about to unearth. Once the tree trunk fell to the side, the loggers started cutting it into smaller sizes for easier transport. However, during this routine process, one of the loggers noticed something unusual. They had previously assumed the tree was hollow, and they were partly right. In this case, the sunlight should have penetrated the trunk from end to end. But it didn't, which meant one of two things. The tree was not hollow, or there was something in between. So what did the men find out? What was wrong with the tree? Everyone was waiting to find out about this thing. Several other loggers took a look at it and walked out with confused looks on their faces. How the hell did something like that happen there? What was it anyway? It was a terrible scene, let alone the very first such discovery. One thing was clear to the loggers. They couldn't really use the tree, and they had to see it as a loss of their job. But they also knew that what was stuck between the tree trunk was meaningful and precious. So they took the most logical step. They called their manager. But the manager asked them to concentrate on the day's work as needed. So how should they continue now? The men sat down and discussed the matter. What he had seen in the hole was described as a monster with fangs and paws. But this thing seemed as still as a statue. You could say it has been there for decades. Everything in the tree looked like a monster trying to jump. Others saw him as a wild dog that growled and gaped its teeth. Despite the varying descriptions, one thing was clear to anyone looking inside. He was a living being. Well, it wasn't alive right now, but it must have been there for a while. Curiosity grew, and everyone eagerly waited to learn how the monster got stuck in a hollow tree. Questions and guesses flew, but only one of them was correct. The clue was on the creature's teeth, something they caught closer, on a second or third look. It seemed pretty obvious once they got an even closer look. This animal stuck in the hole has a description close to that of a puppy. It is seen to have a long muzzle, long claws on the legs, and sharp fangs. These characteristics were visible at the entrance to the trunk. But the mystery didn't begin to unfold until loggers discovered the creature was a dog. They sighed when they learned that at one point this creature was a living dog. Curiosity was growing in the consciousness of the workers, and everyone was trying to figure out what had happened to bring the creature into this situation. For this reason, many questions were posed to them. Shortly after completing the day's chores, the loggers dragged the log to what they thought was the right place. This was the place, they thought, where all their questions about the strange dog and his tree would be resolved. The right place to take the journal was to the scientists, who the loggers believed could provide the answers needed. But it took a while, as it took them over a year to get answers. In 1981, a year after the discovery, scientists finally found the answers. The loggers were relieved to have solved the riddle. However, they couldn't help but be sad about the dog's true story. This place is known for its rich collection of wood from all over America. In Waycross, Georgia, there is a museum called the Southern Forest World. The museum was opened as part of the forest industry in the southeastern United States. It shows a collection of timber production from colonial America to modern agricultural techniques. Here the dog landed, still held in the trunk of the tree, as an art object for the people. They had decided to give it to the museum authorities who had helped solve the puzzle. In fact, a great idea. Do you think so? But the museum needed the dog's backstory. The only information he had at the time was that the loggers had discovered the trunk. They wanted the real story. Christina Kilgrove, a biological anthropologist, came to the scene to investigate the possible background. This initially appeared to confirm earlier observations that the dog may have been mummified. But then she quickly dismissed the sightings, pointing out that it was next to impossible. However, the biological anthropologist based at the University of West Florida had exactly the explainable answers. The expert therefore began to provide them with explanations to better help them in relation to what had happened. Although her explanations were more scientific, she tried to do it in a simplified way. Christine broke down the explanation bit by bit, starting with the process of tissue breakdown that triggered the putrefaction process when microbes began to eat the tissue shortly after her death. They grow, they reproduce, and they start to take hold of the body. It happens very quickly, explained the anthropologist. This was, of course, a more logical explanation. Would you agree with that? What did you think? She then presented the internal structure of chestnut trees. This explanation allowed workers to understand why the fur of this species was not yet decomposed. Chestnut trees contain tannin and desiccant, an organic substance capable of absorbing moisture. Christine explained that it is indeed a characteristic of the chestnut tree that keeps nature from taking its course. Therefore, the dog's body lasted much longer in such an environment. Lack of humidity prevented germs from eating body tissue. But that was only half the explanation. What about scavengers that might smell the body from a distance and run for potential food? We therefore understand very well that, even if the beast had no chance of surviving, it died without suffering with exact fur. The absence of microbes in the trunk made it safe from wild birds. Anyone that eats dead meat would never know it was in the tree, said Bertha Sue Dixon, director of Southern Forest World. Since there were no active microbes, there was no scent to attract carnivores. And even if there was a smell, it would be blown through the hollow trunk and away from potential scavengers. It all made sense, but the big question stuck in the minds of many. How did the dog get there? It seems that the mummified dog in this chest was once a hunter. According to a researcher, it was during a hunting session that he entered the hole while pursuing his prey, from which he could not get out. According to Bertha, the dog was a hunting dog, and he had to hunt something in the tree. In 1960, the dog was 4 years old when he died. He must have chased a raccoon or a squirrel by going through a hole and following it deep into the trunk. He may have even tried poking around and never have noticed that the trunk was narrowing upwards. The tree had a great height, which did not discourage the dog from going towards its prey. When he reached 8 feet above the ground, he could not get out of the hole. Long remaining in the hole, the phenomenon of the chimney carried him away for life. The dog must have been adamant because he never gave up on pulling the trunk until he was at 8 feet tall. He was never able to free himself from the chestnut and died there. A chimney effect occurred in the hollow shaft, creating an upward draft. This took away the smell of the dead animal that would otherwise have attracted insects and other organisms that feed on dead animals. The hollow tree also allowed for relatively dry conditions, and the tannic acid from the oak helped harden the animal's skin. The museum dog has a very high reputation in this place. However, no one knows the name of this famous dog. What if the museum that housed it gave it a name to identify it? Until 2002, the mysterious dog did not have a name. He was popular as a mummified dog in the southern forestry world and was the center of the museum, amid important tree species such as cypress, pine, and oak. Today, he is the ambassador of the museum, which now uses his image in most of its promotional materials and postcards. What an incredible story! We never expected such a discovery. And you? Finally, the mummified dog had been named by the museum circle. Finally, visitors to this public place could personify it and identify it among the works of art that are on display. That name found was Stucky. After the dog was known for years as the mummified dog, it was finally given the name Stucky. The name was born after a lively naming contest in which the three names Stucky, Chipper, and Dogwood received the most votes. But it was Stucky that turned out to be the most popular name. Stucky's story intrigued many. Unhappy and sad, this hunting dog would have had the good fortune to be a good and faithful friend if this unfortunate story had not happened. Whether people feel sorry for Stucky or not, they find his story quite intriguing. Therefore, it will stay where it has been for the past few decades. You can take your family and friends for a fun day trip and visit Southern Forest World in Waycross, Georgia. Let this story surprise you. We promise you won't be bored.